Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we're going to be talking about celebrating women in logistics and supply chain. So the logistics industry is, I guess, a prime area that has been traditionally really male dominated. And as a group, we really want to tackle the challenges in the industry for women, but also the great opportunities within this sector. So we're going to be talking about success stories from our guest speakers and the opportunities within logistics and supply chain. So this session is going to be recorded today. So if anybody's got any questions, then please pop them in the question box and we'll do our best to answer them towards the end of the session. So an introduction to myself. So my name is Victoria Hicks. I head up the FMCG team across the country for Infinite Talent. And I'm really passionate about this subject because less than a quarter of the workforce within logistics and supply chain are made up of women. And I feel like this is a really important topic for us to keep on the agenda from a recruitment perspective, but also from a talent perspective. So I'm going to hand over to Grace, who's my colleague within Infinite Talent.
Hello, everyone. So I am the account director for Infinite Talent, and my job is to basically look after our key accounts. So I actually work very closely with Morledge, who is on the panel. And yeah, so I basically deal with our high volume accounts and just ensuring that the recruitment process is really slick for both client and candidate. Okay, so I would, before I introduce our fabulous panel, I would just like to give a couple more facts then about women in logistics. So according to an article, Why Women Could Be the Answer to Supply Chain's Future by Sian Hopwood, only 17% of chief supply chain officers are women. However, she then does go on to say that 75% of companies plan to make changes to build more resilient supply chains. So on that note, let me introduce our fabulous panel. So we have Cerys Johnson, who is the CEO of Accenture. Hi, Cerys. We have Becky Kilduff, who is the CIO of Clipper.
Hi, Becky.
Hi.
Hello. And then we have Sarah Morledge, who is the Group Recruitment Manager for Clipper Logistics.
Hi.
Hello, Sarah. You all right? Oh, you're on mute. Oh,
sorry, I'm having some IT issues today. So if I do drop off, so I'm kind of in the middle of an office. So I had taken myself out of the main office. So I'll be as discreet as I can. But
wouldn't be a webinar without any tech issues, would it?
Absolutely typical. It's been fine all morning.
Don't worry. So welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us today. So could you start then by telling us just a little bit about yourselves, a bit of background, and just your current role, please? So we're going to start with Cerys, please.
Hello. And I have to make one correction, Grace. Whilst I would love to be CEO of Accenture, Judy Sweet might be a little bit upset with me. Or I've had an unexpected promotion. I'm CEO of REPL Group, which is part of Accenture.
Yes. Yeah.
But thanks for the promotion. So for those people that don't know, REPL's a global technology and consulting group, and we were founded in 2007, and Accenture acquired us just over a year ago. So we specialise in a few areas, including workforce transformation and in-store technology, but supply chain is one of our key specialism areas. And I joined REPL 11 years ago as a project manager. I think I was about employee number 30. And I think last count we were about 650 people. Based predominantly in the UK. We've got a large team in South Africa, some in Germany, and a decent sized team in the US as well. And I've been CEO for the last 5 years. And in fact, when I became CEO, I was really embarrassed to find out that there were barely over 20% females in REPL, including the central functions who were predominantly female. And we had no females at all in supply chain and the software engineering team. So we've still got a really long way to go. But I'm really pleased that we're now nudging 40% female. We've got some incredibly talented women in our teams. Notably, our supply chain team is now female-led, and there's over 30% female there. And Accenture have got a stated aim of being 50% female by 2025. So we're rapidly trying to learn more from our Accenture parents now about how we can help progress our journey.
Incredible.
Thank you so much, Cerys. And can we go to Becky, please?
Yeah, hi everybody. So I'm Becky Kilduff. I'm CIO for Clipper Logistics. Clipper Logistics are a retail-focused logistics business working mainly with a number of high street brands, supporting them from e-commerce, store deliveries, wholesale, retail, etc. So I joined Clipper in 2008 when we were a £70 million turnover business. I've been here 13 years. We're now an 800 million turnover business with, upwards of 12,000 employees. And when I started, there were 6 men in the IT team and myself. So there are now 96, and I'd say about 45% of that are women.
Wow.
Of my 3 department heads, 2 of those are women. And so, I think we've got one of probably the most diverse teams probably within Clipper. Long may it continue.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, fabulous. Thanks, Becky. And then Sarah, please.
Last but no means least. So I'm a relatively newcomer to Clipper Logistics. So a lot of long tenures in Clipper Logistics, but I'm just about to hit at the end of my 2nd year now. So been in sort of FMCG, done a lot within supply chain for the likes of Specsavers, but sort of a logistics 3PL. This is my first introduction, and I would say I think Becky's right. Perhaps the diversity in some of our teams is not where we want it to be. It's certainly on our agenda moving forward. It's certainly on the agenda. We've recently appointed a head of HR for diversity and inclusivity, and she's working on how we work to develop. So whilst we've seen some directors in the business this year, some female logistics female directors be appointed, I think there's certainly more work to do in that senior piece of work, whilst we still see predominantly our general manager is majority male. That's not because we go out and deliberately discriminate. It's just that that's just how it has been historically. And I think what's great is from a Clipper perspective is we've moved our recruitment model from being just about we'll take somebody if they've got logistics experience. We're now looking at matching our culture in a more we're looking at different ways of bringing people into the business who can add value to Clipper and move us in the direction that we want to continue to travel. And that potentially is about matching our culture, not just about a solid fit for logistics essentially. So that's where we've seen some great, but generally across the business we are really gender neutral, but we're kind of a neutral, but as we move towards the top end, that's when we see the weighting drop a little bit, but it is something that's on our agenda to work in for moving forward.
Absolutely, Sarah. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for that. So we have prepared some questions, ladies, for each of you, and then we've got some specific questions, to each of you, and then we're going to open them up to the whole group. All right, so I'm going to hand over to Victoria.
Thank you. So yeah, like Ray said, we've got some specific questions for you guys because we know your backgrounds, we know your experience and your stories so far. So if we could start with Cerys, what challenges have you faced as a female within the logistics and supply chain space?
Well, I think perhaps if I go right the way back, so I started my career over 30 years ago, and I did a degree in physics with applied physics and electronics, and my first job was working at a power station. When I did my degree, I was the only female on my degree course, and when I worked at the power station, I was the only female at the power station, to the extent that they didn't even have any female toilets there. So as a how old was I? 22-year-old. I had to go through the male shower blocks to get to the male toilets. So that was slightly daunting, I have to say. But it was, you survive that, you can survive anything. And I have to say, absolutely, the guys at the power station were they were true gentlemen. They were absolutely fantastic. But I think it would be really rare if there was a woman with 30 years experience, the same as myself, who hadn't experienced discrimination in the workplace. I know that I have been told in an interview that I'm not going to give you the job unless you promise not to get pregnant, at least for the first couple of years. Once I got my first job, I was told, well, they have to employ more women these days, and felt that my achievements were really diminished. I've heard male colleagues speak really disparagingly about women, from refusing to give them jobs in case they get pregnant, to making personal comments about a woman's appearance, to, I think one of the worst I had, he was a father of 2 daughters, and he said he didn't understand why they bothered educating girls at all. And he was actually being serious about it. So, there are so many blockers that have been there through my career, and I think there's also a perception that when you're in a male dominated industry, that the onus is on the woman to fit in, as opposed to making it an inclusive environment where you feel welcome. And so much has been done. It is so much better than it was, but there is so much more still yet to do. And I think it's not so much, I think the great progress has been made on the things that have been easier to measure, like, gender diversity, gender pay gap, gender progression, all of those types of things. But I think it's those little microaggressions in the workplace that are still there, that actually really do, they create an atmosphere where I think essentially a lot of women feel less respected, and that then sucks confidence away.
They lose their voice, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how did those experiences, like the toilet stories, absolutely horrific? I can't imagine being 22 and walking through.
You don't even like using it.
No, we're in an office today where it's shared bathrooms, and even that for me is enough. Those experiences that you faced, all those different conversations that you had throughout your career, how did they affect your motivations to get to where you are today?
Yeah, I think it made, if anything, it made me even more determined. And I think, I've got a motto that, my children are bored of hearing it, but my motto is always set your own standards. So I've tried not to sort of obsess about what's happening around me, what others are doing, but really set my sights on what I want to achieve and try to stay focused on achieving that. And I think one of the things that's really helped me has been focusing on what my priorities are, what my values are, what I want to achieve. And then that essentially gives you the framework. And when times are tough, as they inevitably are for everybody, it gives you that sort of frame of reference where you can say, right, okay, I do know why I'm doing this, and I do want to do this. And also, leaning into other people and getting support from, there's some fantastic mentors that I've had through my career, both male and female, and it's being able to lean in on those people as well and get their advice and their support.
Yeah.
So jumping over to Becky then, Becky, I guess, what do your work colleagues think about your success so far and how you've got to where you are today?
Well, always complimentary, and I think the females probably tend to comment more than the males, actually, because I think they probably see it as a bigger achievement, which is a shame, really, isn't it, that a female has managed to get to the C-suite. And I didn't actually say in my introduction, but I am the only female in the C-suite at Clipper. So
go on, Becky.
yeah, so you know, and it's incredible in this day and age that you can still go to a meeting and be the only female. I find that incredible, but it does happen. But yeah, always complimentary. And I think actually a lot of the females that I work with feel more represented probably within the business, because there is a female in that leadership role. That, you know, we do bring a different dynamic, I think, to a male environment generally.
Yeah, and that's something we definitely want to touch on later on the webinar. But I think definitely for you, Becky, when we've spoke to you previously about your career, what sacrifices have you had to make to get to where you are today, being a female?
Yeah, and I think there's two things, actually. One, being a female, but I also think being a working mum. I think it's very different, male and female, because, you know, I feel that I'm always a mum, really. And so, you know, I have sacrificed family time. I've sacrificed events in the family that are probably more important to me than maybe to the family, but, you know, and you know, they are things that you have to do. I mean, in you know, my husband's sacrificed his career so that I could have mine, really, because you can't be up at 5 o'clock in the morning and out of the door and back at, you know, 8, 10 o'clock at night. But when you have a small family, if you don't have somebody to support you in that way. So, you know, I do feel that there has been a lot of sacrifices, but obviously, you know, they're the things that I've chosen to do to be able to achieve the position, really, and to achieve the goals that I'd set out, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So for everybody then, I guess a bit more of an open question, what do you think are the challenges for women in logistics and supply chain at the moment? What do you think those main challenges are?
I'll go first. I think one of the main challenges is exactly as we've been talking about. It's that lack of representation. And I think also, you know, Becky, it was really interesting you saying about the challenges of being a parent, because there is this assumption that as a mum, you are the primary carer, and particularly when the children are younger and, you know, they have a temperature or they vomit or whatever your kids always seem to do at the most convenient times. It's that, you know, it always happens when you've got a really important meeting and you feel really conflicted, and, you know, those, I think things like flexible working policies are really, really, really important. I think things like shared parental leave are incredibly important.
Yes.
I think an employer that really values that you are a person and not just a resource that's deployed to do a job. And, you know, it applies equally for male and female. But as I said when I was speaking previously, I think one of the biggest barriers is those little microaggressions that are there, the comments that are happening, you know, the, you know, oh, you know, is it the time of the month? You know, those types of things that, you know, they're so dangerous and poisonous, because if you picked up on every single one of them, then you are the hysterical moaning woman that won't get off.
You're sensitive, don't react, don't overreact.
Exactly. But unless you call them out, these things don't stop. So I think for me, I love what you're doing here, because I think one of the biggest and best things we can do is educate people, because I think a lot of the time, you know, there are phrases like, oh, he's such an old woman, or stop being a girl, or, you know, there's little things that just are said. And so I think there's a massive piece of education in just binning those things.
Not okay to say.
Yeah.
It's not okay at all.
Yeah.
You know, or grow a pair, you know, that's such a
Oh,
right
yeah,
thing
yeah.
to make a decision. But you know, women don't have a pair to grow. You know,
Yeah.
it's those types of things that I think will really help break down some of those barriers. And I think having role models like Becky is so vitally important. Since we had a female supply chain lead, we had no females in the team, and now we're high 30%, nudging 40%. When I became CEO of REPL, there were no women on the board. At the point we were acquired by Accenture, we were 50-50 represented. So, you know, it doesn't take a lot to really shift the way that people think, but it needs to be a groundswell, and everybody needs to feel part of it.
Yeah, and I think actually just adding to that around some of the comments, etc. So I've been fairly open at work about menopause actually. And you know, I can see at times some people would visibly cringe if you mention. I mean, Clippers actually launched the Generation M, which is Generation Menopause within the business. But again, having two females who work for me who are in a similar age to me, similar position, etc. I think, you know, not shying away from, you know, if I've yawned in a meeting and somebody said, "Are we keeping you awake?" You know, no, it's the menopause that keeps me awake actually. Being open about it. Because I do think that there are things that they wouldn't say to a man that they would say to a female, or and you know, coming back to the being a mum and sacrifices, you know, sacrificing your own personal well-being quite often is one of those things that you do as a female, is that, you know, I don't want anybody to think that I'm not feeling my best today, so I'll put on a brave face.
So we put, it's almost like we put our masks on almost, don't we? And we put our Wonder Woman capes on, and you know.
Yeah, and I'm sure that men often have this similar feelings, but actually they wouldn't get the same comment, I think, as a female would.
It's mad how some subjects have still got like a massive stigma attached to them, like the menopause and things like that, and how women feel, I guess, still uncomfortable in the workplace to bring up topics like that, because they're a huge part of everybody's lives.
Well,
and it's something everybody goes through as well. Every female hits that point.
So, and I think some of it is feeling comfortable around your peers as well, isn't it, in terms of, you know, so I do, because I've been at Clipper for quite a long time, I've built up relationships, etc. So, you know, it's you know, less daunting maybe for me to share that, but I openly do, just to make sure that hopefully, again, it paves the way for more women who are coming up or are further down the ranks, that it's being talked about in the C-suite, the M word. It makes it a bit less uncomfortable if further down. So
yeah. And Sarah, from your perspective, then, you know, do you think there's any challenges?
Absolutely. I think, just listening to you guys, it's quite interesting, isn't it? I think in a female career, there's like a window of opportunity. It's like, you know, they're like 28, 30, they're getting married. Well, they're going to want kids soon. But I remember being in an engineering environment where one of my colleagues was told that actually it's probably better if she waited, because if she went into that team when she was just getting married, they'd assume she'd be off in a year or so. And it's like, oh my God. And then we sort of get to the other end of you know, well, we're just talking about the menopause, and that is, you know, that sort of stigma attached to women of a certain age coming into a business and that sort of thing. And it's I personally haven't come across any of those sort of stigmas, and sort of being the age that I am, you know, like you know, Becky's saying about talking about menopause. It's a big thing that's being driven again across our business, which is fabulous from a, you know, a change curve from logistics and Clipper indeed. And I think, you know, I think I joined Clipper and I was a little bit of a whirlwind Tasmanian devil a little bit, in the sense of kind of coming in, trying to get policies and driving things. And I remember my boss saying to me, well, you need to get, you know, some conviction. So that's when, so I've got Jack, who's in my team. He goes off in 3 weeks for his shared parental leave. So I've got Emma, who works flexible times around school, part-time, but is still a big character in the team. She still has ownership of the, you know, her sort of her roles. She's not treated as a half, essentially. And I hope that just by us all wanting to drive things like that forward, and basically, you know, having something to say, well, actually, we've done this before, or this is what we do. It's, you know, it does help. But in logistics, I think the only surprise for me, and it was Clipper probably more than logistics, was just the speed and pace of everything that we were able, and I think that I haven't really faced any discrimination against being female or in the business. It is, you know, historically it's been a very male-led industry, but certainly in my current position, I haven't felt that. I just think what's great is we as a business are really sort of looking at these things, and there is no, you know, and I think Becky helps with that, because we take it to the C-suite and she goes, yeah, let's do it. But, you know, right, we want to do this about menopause, well, right, we want to drive this.
I think looks like Sarah's frozen.
Oh,
not for us.
can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, carry on, Becky. But yeah, I think it helps that it's driven by somebody at your level that goes, yeah, let's do it. Well, why can't we do it? Why don't we do it? We can do it, because Clipper in essentially can move so quickly that we can take on board these new things that are coming, that we want to start driving forward. You know, our whole ESG agenda, you know, we were so from a business perspective, you know, we sort of have done so much already in that arena, and you know, and down to all these things that we're looking at moving forward has been great. That it's all about the new world. We're not stuck in our ways, essentially, that historically I think logistics businesses have been and can be, and some still are. But you know, from a recruitment perspective, we don't just look at, you know, we're looking at, you know, what we're offering from our employee value proposition, what's our ESG agenda, what's our diversity agenda, you know, what days are we looking at that people can go out and make a difference with them from a CSR perspective. You know, we're looking at training, we're looking at the degree apprenticeships, we're looking at investing heavily in our learning and development. So there's so much more that candidates are looking at from that business. They're not just looking for a salary. And you know what, if you start, you know, I think you have to be cute in playing the salary game, because you know, it really, the added value that, you know, you know, people coming into the business are looking for is not just that base salary. They want to know that they're working for somebody. So, you know, I think that's you know, a challenge in itself, is to get those things out there to share with people what we're doing. But I think certainly from a gender perspective, I've seen some great things happen within the sort of 24 months that I've been there within Clipper. So
good.
Yeah. Amazing.
And then back to Cerys, I think it'd be great to know your advice for women who really want to get into logistics and supply chain sector. I guess, what would your message be to them?
So I think one of the biggest things that I would recommend is find an active mentor or a coach. And when I say active, I mean someone that is properly going to, almost like a sponsor, someone that really is vested in helping you develop your career. And they don't, you know, it doesn't have to be a woman. You know, I've had plenty of male sponsors through my career, and there's loads of male allies out there. I think if you can find somebody that is willing to invest that time and effort and energy with you, and you can develop that really productive relationship with, that can move mountains. I think that's, for me, perhaps the single biggest. But I think it's also about learning from other women who've had experiences to share the good, the bad and the ugly, because I've found there's a fantastic female support group that's out there.
Yeah.
I have never been turned down by any woman that I've reached out to say, can I talk to you about this, you know, and similarly, if anybody does the same to me, it's, you know, there is I think people generally feel privileged if someone asks them for help and support, and I think you know, my advice would be, don't be shy in doing that. And if there are role models that are there, you know, if I listen into podcasts or to webinars or things like that, and there's somebody that's speaking, even if I don't know them, I'll connect with them on LinkedIn and just say thank you for that, and you know, can we connect? And you know, invariably they say yes, and then you know, we develop that sort of relationship and that network. So you know, that's really beneficial. I think the other thing as well though is that you really have to, and we've touched on it, you have to really develop resilience and focus on self-care, because it can sometimes be really lonely and sometimes really frustrating. So I think that, you know, that moment when you're in the shower in the morning and going, right, how do I feel? And actually have that moment of reflection of, you know, where am I on a 1 to 10? And then going, okay, I'm not feeling so great, and working out then, before you get to the point where, you know, you fall over, you get burnt out or anything like that. It's being proactive with self-care and seeing that as an investment in yourself, as opposed to time that you can't waste elsewhere. And it's you know, this is from experience, because it's taken me years to get to that point where I've realized that if I am struggling, I need to put my oxygen mask on first before then being able to help others.
Absolutely.
That's a really good thing to say.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
From being in recruitment, it's really exciting, and I feel privileged to be recruiting in the logistics and supply chain space, because it is so exciting and it is the biggest sector in the industry. So it'd be great to hear from you, Sarah, what you think will be the opportunities within the sector over the next 10 years, because already we can see so far this year the opportunities within, you know, technology and supply chain. What do you think are going to be the main growth sectors within the industry?
No, I was having to think about that, and I think logistics in a whole has just taken, I mean, it's just obviously grown significantly. Like you say, I think the whole technology piece, and as we move into, I mean, who'd have thought, you know, we're looking at driverless vehicles, you know, aerial drone, you know, all of those things are things that, you know, the logistics sector are going to have to look at. You know, the whole kind of green piece around, you know, making sure that we, you know, we work on our ESG agenda. I think things like the central functions that we have in our business, you know, the growth that we've seen within those, because actually supporting our sites across all different areas has become more important to us as we've grown. I think the like you say, we've talked around the technology side of things, and I just think generally within logistics, it's opening up more opportunities to people, because I think we've all had to put our hat on and say, look, if you've got logistics experience, fabulous, but actually, do you know what, if you've got resilience, or you can work with autonomy, and you know, you've worked in a fast-paced environment before. And I think for me, that's what I like to see, is actually, do you know what, we're not just bringing in the same people, and we're not seeing the same people go round and round across our competitors. What we're seeing is actually, do you know what, we're bringing in people and we're giving them a chance, or we're taking the opportunity to develop them. So we're saying, do you know what, 50% is right for this business, you know, 50% you've got the skill set. Do you know what, we've got this fabulous area of development that we can put you through, that we can see that actually within 2 years. And I think it's understanding that with our development, because essentially, you know, Clipper's sort of power behind you will develop you into being this person that within leadership, within logistics, and not necessarily just looking for a replica of every sort of person that's been there. So I think across logistics, really exciting that it's opening up. I think we've had to step out of our comfort zone and say, do you know what, some of our central functions can work from a hybrid model. I don't think we ever did that before, did we, Becky? I think we were You know, it was never something that we'd looked at. You know, I think we've got that as a competitive edge to some of our competitors, that we are now open to that. And that also brings around that, you know, other flexibility that we're prepared to look at from a business perspective. So lots going on. I think there's lots of evolution within logistics, which is really exciting. But I think COVID has changed our mindsets into just how we run our business and how we can run our business. And we don't just run our business 9 till 5 anymore. And I think that's really important, that it isn't just a, you know, we've recognized that and realized that as a business. So but we still see, you know, we're still seeing phenomenal growth. We're still seeing a lot of roles come through for you know, across all of our, and we obviously, there's an automation piece that's coming in, you know, there's a lot of automation. So we're seeing, so one of my teams, she's working quite closely with our big automation project to bring people in with that skill set, which again, historically, you know, back to pick and pack and, you know, a manual piece of paper is not that many worlds away. So yeah, that's where I think we've just, COVID has helped us change for the better.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of companies say that in the last sort of 6 months. Actually, COVID was as you know, life changing as that was. There was some actual, I suppose, we had to take positives out of a pretty negative situation, and a lot of companies have said
I think
that.
the other thing to remember in that sort of COVID piece is what happened for Clipper within that COVID, you know, sector. And that is, you know, when everybody's model was moving to an e-com, to use the words of Richard Cowlishaw's, we are the darlings of e-com, aren't we, Becky? You know, and that was his kind of selling point. But you know what, people's models changed, and we had to react so quickly that, you know, it brought this fantastic growth for Clipper. That we thoroughly deserve, because we moved at such pace while other businesses were probably going to a meeting to decide whether we could do it. I think we'd already done it, you know, we'd turned on the WMS and we were off. But so I think COVID in itself, Clipper probably, you know, in COVID saw this exponential growth, but I also think what it did, it joined a really steep change curve that has been fantastic for us from a employee value proposition piece as their sort of recruitment manager, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
So Becky, what would be your message to hiring managers within the logistics supply chain space, and why is it important to have that diversity within people's teams?
Well, I think you know, the importance for me really is that I think women bring a different cultural dynamic actually to teams. I read something recently that you know, that women generally favour more transformational type roles and will drive for more transformation, which is something that I've done at Clipper for IT, not anything to do with me being a female, but maybe, you know, that is part of why I have driven it forward so much, because, you know, I kind of felt that it needed to be driven forward. But I think they bring a different perspective as well, do females, and it's about having a balance. So it's about having a balance. I think for me, one of the things that I still see is that in the real technical space of IT, it is very male dominated. We have absolutely no women coming through that. And I would like to see, so with my team, you know, we're talking about apprenticeships that we can do, and trying to get some females into those types of apprenticeships. You know, the project management space is very female dominated actually. We've got a good balance there, but when you get into a technical role, and I think that again it probably comes to some of the stereotyping that we do in schools still, that the boys tend to migrate off to, you know, taking things apart, and the girls not so much really. So I think that there's something that needs to be a step change then, and I would really like my own team to start to look at some of our local education centres, schools, colleges, etc., to see what we can do as Clipper to maybe get into those colleges early and start to look at how we bring some females through that route.
It'd be great to have your feedback if that's something you do in the future, because I think we definitely see it from a more of a younger generation. That you talk about logistics and transport and you just think of a warehouse picking and packing on a forklift, or you think of driving a lorry, but actually the sector, that's a huge part of the sector. That's how we get goods from A to B.
There's so much behind that.
Like the purchasing and procurement of those goods, and like you said, Becky, the technology around it, and Sarah, the WMS, and there's automation. There's so many exciting parts of logistics that I think it's a never-ending sector, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is. It's a huge untapped sector, really, in terms of, my own son who's coming through college at the moment, and I've talked to him a lot about the supply chain, because it's not discussed, it's not talked about, it's not really presented as a career opportunity of, what is supply chain. So I think, there's opportunity around that, and when I say supply chain, I am talking really around logistics and what goes on around that. So yeah, I think my advice in terms of my team really is that whilst we're doing well in the overall space, when you break down the teams and you start to look in the individual teams, the technical space is still very male dominated, and I think there's opportunity there to tap into. And I think to Sarah's point about COVID, definitely from a Clipper point of view, our business was a very visible business. They wanted to see you, in the office 9 to 5, etc. And I think we've been able to move away from that with COVID. That does lend itself more to females, I think, in terms of bringing them into the environment, because we can be more flexible around school drop off, pick up, school holidays, working from home, those kind of things that are often important to working mums.
You're attracting a new pool of candidates, aren't you, that probably you wouldn't have spoken to before COVID. You're like office, 8 till 6. Actually, it's not like that anymore. You can work from home and you can go off for half an hour and drop the kids off to school in the morning. I think it's a fantastic move forward.
Yeah.
Now everybody's judged on output as opposed to presenteeism, and I think that's a massive change. So and it gives the people that are genuinely contributing, whether male or female, the opportunity to have their contributions known, because we've all worked in offices where you've had the time leech that's been present for a huge amount of time but hasn't actually contributed that much, and then the person that comes in gets their head down and goes through a mountain of work, whereas that's become, I felt that I've had much more visibility of how my team, the productivity of my team through doing remote working than I ever did when we were all based in various different offices.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
It sounds like from all of your stories that the businesses that you work for have come really, really far in terms of that diversity piece, but it sounds like as a sector, there's still a way to go. How do we get there? What's the strategy behind getting more females through the door within this sector?
So there was somebody that I spoke to about this who was an HR director of a massive company in the US, and she was fabulous. And I was talking to her about, because it was a supply chain company, predominantly a software vendor. I was talking to her about this and asking her for advice. And she said, if you're approaching it from how do you develop diversity, that's the wrong end. You first need to create an inclusive environment before you focus on diversity. And that was quite transformational for my thinking.
Yeah.
So you need, it's not about inviting people to the party. It's about making sure that that party you invite people to is a party they're going to enjoy. So it really made me question some of the things that we were doing, and really put that inclusive lens on it. And that wasn't just from a gender perspective, but across the whole remit of inclusivity, but working out how we could be a workplace where everyone felt able to be themselves, and whether that's themselves as a sole female, whether it is themselves as, you know, a parent, whether it is that, you know, they have different religious beliefs to what the majority have, whether, you know, whatever that is. And it's about celebrating those differences as opposed to saying, you know, you look or sound different to me, therefore you're not in my club. So it was throwing open those doors, and it actually created some really fantastic, really productive conversations. You know, so I think from a, you know, it's well known, I could quote any number of studies, there have been many of them, that a diverse workforce is more successful, you have better revenue growth, you have better profitability, you know, they are more successful. It allows for fresh ideas, it drives innovation. But the thing that was really interesting about what you were talking about, Sarah, is I was introduced to this concept of culture add, not culture fit, which is, you know, what you were describing, that you've done in Clipper. So when bringing people into the organisation or promoting people within the organisation, it's looking at about how they'll be additive in a positive way to the culture, and not search for clones. You know, they fit here well, and, you know, they feel like me. And so there's been quite a lot of training that we've done on unconscious bias, but we've also said to people, look, we all have unconscious bias. It's not anything that we need to shy away from. We need to recognize that we have unconscious bias, and then we need to compensate for it. And I think where we've moved to, and, you know, we still need to go further, is you know, our Great Place to Work scores had 89% of the team said that they'd recommend REPL as a great place to work. And I think it was 96% of the team said they felt able to be themselves at work. And for me, that is the measure that we're judging ourselves by, to ensure that everyone feels welcome and able to be the best version of themselves. If it doesn't sound too trite when they're at work.
Completely agree. I think from speaking to all of you guys today, it's so important that we have diversity across the sector, but it's also really exciting to hear about the growth and the opportunities that are going on, whether that's IT, whether that's, you know, pure operational. There's so much growth in the sector that I think the diversity needs to be on the topic of our agendas all the time. And it's really amazing to hear your stories on our panel today, because you guys are so successful being females in this space. It's great to hear your stories and your experiences you've had so far. I think we both could just sit here probably all day and hear about the stories,
you guys.
the toilet story, and, you know, all the comments you've had to deal with. I think we could talk about it forever, but unfortunately we don't have forever. But I think we clearly can see that improving diversity from a business perspective, but also accepting people's differences, and we know that is the key to businesses' importance of their well-being. But I guess the sector, how much it's under pressure at the moment, how important diversity is within that space. So I guess for us, we would really like to keep this on the agenda within the future with you guys.
Absolutely. You know, of course, we would love to do a follow-up event, but hopefully face to face. Get everyone together. And, you know, I think just to kind of conclude everything that we've talked about today, and again, you know, I can't add more to what you've just said about how amazing, you know, it is listening to you, hearing about your stories and your background, but, you know, again, many skills and power that women can bring to the table within our sector. It is so important, and it is something naturally that our male counterparts cannot bring. So, you know, of course, we want to celebrate success across all genders, and of course, as a business, we would like to create a forum and a network where people can get involved and feel supported. So again, I think that would be really nice to have a follow-up event, follow-up session together.
We have got a question that's come through, so we're going to open that up to the group, if that's okay. So somebody's asked that she'd like to talk about the work that's in our Colleagues Trust. So it sounds like the Career Colleagues Trust is working on developing a number of logistics career colleagues around the country. I guess, what are the opportunities within that sector from your guys' perspective, working around sort of like colleges and schools, etc.? Where do you see the opportunities there? I know, Rebecca, you've already touched on that slightly. You want to go into schools?
I know our early career team, so our head of learning development and his team have got a huge agenda this year to bring in our degree apprentices. We've ring-fenced a number of positions across our business, and I think there's a lot of work now that we can start doing, because I think, you know, again, let's use the C word, and that is, you know, it stopped us from having those careers events. It stopped us from networking, you know, face to face in the logistics sector, and I think it stopped us, you know, that us not being able to get into schools and not being able to do those career talks, and just sort of having that sort of contact with people that perhaps aren't, you know, want to see success before they sort of explore whether it's an avenue they want to go down. So, you know, we are doing it, and our early career team are fantastically bringing in, I think we're tasked with even up to 100 degree apprentices this year, and it will be fabulous if we get to that number. But I think it's, you know, it's certainly something that I can pass on to our team that specifically work with that that early career piece, that we can start maybe getting involved, or certainly making some introductions for them.
Yeah, and we would definitely like to get involved within that. If there's any way that we can help at all, then we'd love to be able to do that. One incredible question that's come in, I think we all have been keen to talk about, is how can our male allies support the progress in women's careers?
I think Cerys mentioned this earlier, and you know, I think I've done something similar, which is finding that mentor, and it doesn't have to be a female mentor. I think that you know, it's good to have somebody who can. I think women often second guess themselves quite a lot in the careers, etc. And I think, you know, my advice to people, to females who want to get on, is, you know, believe in yourself, because actually you're probably a lot more capable than you give yourself credit for. And I think finding some male mentors who can help you to enforce that, and you know, give you a positive confirmation that the things that you're doing are right. I think that is where males can come in supporting females more in the workplace. Even if they're not mentors, is just maybe being a bit more alive to, you know, maybe how a female is thinking in an environment, and being a bit more supportive around the things that you know, they're trying to get across, etc.
Yeah, I think it's I've recently read a book which was called How to Be Anti-Racist, and you know, it was saying it's not good enough to not be a racist yourself. You need to you know, actively be a supporter and an ally, and call things out and educate, and have that passion behind you. I think it's, you know, it's being anti-sexist that we're talking about. So yes, you know, the fact that individual men may not be sexist in how they talk and act is absolutely fantastic, but I think sometimes it's that championing of some of the female colleagues around you. It's listening to those lived experiences. I mean, even between my husband and I, when I tell him about stresses that I had when our children were younger, he's like, I never know you felt like that. This is, you know, this is my husband. So I've obviously not done a great job in communicating to him. I think it's, you know, it's asking how do you manage, and you know, how you're getting on, and you know, it doesn't have to be a massive deep commitment that the man is making. It just needs to be that, how are you finding things, how are you getting on, how's this going, and just provide the environment where the woman feels comfortable opening up and feels that she's going to be supported and not ridiculed.
I think Becky, you touched on that earlier, some of the comments that are made in the workplace. I think that's where our male allies can kind of call out that behaviour, and I guess teach their colleagues that actually those comments aren't okay anymore.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. We've had some really nice comments actually, that people have really enjoyed the webinar today, so that's great to hear.
Yeah.
Somebody's put actually that they're brand new to Clipper, and they are really keen to hear ideas in terms of how you guys, I guess, can advocate women in the group. I think it's quite important that we don't, I guess, rule out our male counterparts here.
Yeah.
So how do we talk about this topic without pushing the diversity topic too much in any way?
I think we're keen from a business perspective and from a Clipper perspective. There's been a creation of a Women in Logistics group that's been headed up by our head of HR, Emma Sutherland, who's doing a great job in just again doing very similar to what you guys are doing here, which is about showcasing some successes and sort of showcasing people that really can sort of relate to both sides of being treated really well and perhaps not being treated as well, a few years back. And I think, from a perspective of, if you're keen to be an advocate, I think getting involved in those Women in Logistics groups, and listening to some of the challenges that are being faced. And again, it's not, like you say, it's not all about intention to behave. I think when you've been in an environment where that behavior has been encouraged or that is not been called out previously, and it's not necessarily about looking at people and forcing change or pointing finger. It's just about understanding that perhaps the industries have moved on from the time that you were perhaps on the shop floor, and how it does impact people when people say or refer to, and that's against any really. But I think getting involved in some of those groups is a great way to advocate it in our business, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we didn't want this. Again, it's difficult because we wanted this webinar to be a celebration of women, and I know that we will, as females here all on the panel, we did want to obviously push the more female side. However, we do want to open this up to males, and we want males to educate themselves and take some learning from this. And I think just looking at the comments, I think we've absolutely achieved that today. So that's something that's definitely put a smile on my face today.
Yeah, for sure. I think there are some more questions that we probably haven't answered, but I guess to open that up, if anybody has asked a question we haven't got round to it, then feel free to drop us a connection on LinkedIn, and we can talk about it over there. We can try and answer your questions to our best ability on there, if that's okay.
And we can direct them to you guys as well.
Yeah, if that's okay.
That's okay, yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for your time. It's been amazing, and we really hope we can do this again soon.
Yeah, and now COVID is, well, apparently it's on the rise, but now it's more manageable. Shouldn't say that, should we?
No.
We will try and do our next event face to face, where we can actually all get together.
Yeah.
And I'll just pick that up. All right.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye, everybody.